In this movie, I'll show you a couple of different ways to modify strokes using the Live Paint Bucket tool. So what I want to do is add strokes around these intersecting areas. And so I'll go ahead and grab my Live Paint Bucket, which, as you may recall, you can get by pressing the K key. Now, when I hover inside of a shape, obviously I'm going to change its fill. And just for the sake of demonstration, I'll press the left arrow key a couple of times to go back to my yellow swatch and click inside this area, and very predictably, it changes to a different color. All right, I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on a Mac to undo that change. When I hover over this area, I see that red tracing around the intersecting design area. But for some reason, I can't get to this stroke right there. And if I click even directly on that spot at which the stroke should be, then I'll end up filling whichever area was highlighted. Obviously, I don't want to do that, so I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac. There's a couple of different solutions here. One is a keyboard trick. You can press the Shift key. Notice that your cursor changes from a bucket to a little paintbrush. And you'll probably also get a different series of swatches above your brush. Notice instead of yellow, for example, with blue next door and then none, we've got black with white on one side and then a very dark shade of gray on the other. We'll come back to that in a moment, but in the meantime, I'll just go ahead and shift-click. Now notice that I have the stroke active, and I'll go ahead and shift-click on that stroke in order to add a very thin, weak black stroke. That's not what I want. So I'll go up to the control panel, and I'll click on the second swatch, and I'll change it from this black here inside the grays group. That's my problem, is Illustrator's got the wrong group of swatches selected. I'll go ahead and switch to this rich black in the top row. And also change my stroke, let's say, to 12 points thick. And that way I can assign thicker strokes to my shapes. Now, you might look at this and say, hey, nothing changed inside the illustration. Well, there's two reasons. Again, you're not going to make changes even if the object is selected with the black arrow tool when you're working with the paint bucket, because you have to click with the bucket in order to apply colors. And secondly, in our case, the object isn't even selected. I don't have anything selected inside this artwork, and yet I can still use the tool. You only have to have the path selected for that first click when you establish the Live Paint object. Anyway, at this point, I can now press the Shift key and click on that stroke in order to make it thicker and darker as well. However, I don't really want to work that way. I'm all for keyboard tricks, but in this case, it's completely unnecessary. In order to make the Live Paint Bucket tool so you can modify strokes without pressing the Shift key, go ahead and double-click on the tool's icon here inside the toolbox. And that'll bring up the Live Paint Bucket Options dialog box. And notice right there, we've got a Paint Strokes checkbox and it's turned off. Go ahead and turn it on. You can, by the way, adjust other features of this tool. You can turn off the swatch preview above the cursor. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you can. And you can also change that highlight color. I'm going to switch it to a color that I'm not using in this artwork, which is this bright green. And I'm also going to reduce the width value to 2 points so that I can still see what's up without blocking my artwork. You've got this tips button. You can click on it in order to read about how to use this tool. I'm going to go ahead and just click OK. And now notice if I hover inside of an intersecting area, I see the paint bucket cursor. And if I hover over a stroke between the intersections, then I see my little brush cursor. All right, I'm going to change it to a different color here by pressing the left arrow key a few times until I get to my yellow swatch. And I'll go ahead and click, and oh, I lost my line weight, so I need to reestablish that up here inside the control panel. So I'll change it to 12 points once again, and then I'll click on that stroke in order to apply a 12-point yellow line. And I'll go ahead and click on this area and this one here. As you work, just make sure that you see the brush cursor, because if you see the bucket cursor, no matter how close you are to that line, you're going to fill a shape instead of stroke it. All right, so I'll press Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. And I'll go ahead and click on these other strokes around the intersecting areas inside the circles. So the ones along the outside, I'm going to leave alone. And it looks like I have one more right there above my brain. All right, so again, everything is a live dynamic effect. So if I press the V key to switch back to my black arrow tool, and I go ahead and twirl open the normal layer as well as the live paint object here inside the layers panel. And this time, just for the sake of variety, I'll meatball the magenta circle in order to select it independently of the others. Now I'll go ahead and drag the circle down to a new location, and you can see that everything is updating on the fly. Now the only thing to bear in mind is that you don't want to lose a filled area or a stroked area for that matter either. So if I drag this circle far enough down that it goes outside of the dark blue, so I lost the dark blue up here near the top of the object, and then I drag the circle back, I'm not going to recover the dark blue. Instead, I'll just see some fill color that Illustrator chooses for me. So in order to put things back where they were, I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac 3 times in a row. And we now have the Venn diagram with the properly colored intersecting areas, as well as the yellow strokes around those intersections. So that's how you go about modifying strokes using the Live Paint Bucket tool. In the next movie, I'll show you how to use the Live Paint Selection tool.